Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who've kept us going for over 450 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Phoenix. Thank you, Phoenix.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Phoenix.
you. So it's the 30th anniversary of PlayStation. And if you have I don't know if it's on PS4, but PS5 has like an updated sound and startled the shit out of me because I had no idea it was coming. Started it and walked out of the room and then heard the noise and I was like, whoa, something's busted. Walked back and it was pretty cool. With that, you're gonna see like a lot of like IGN has the top 100 best PlayStation games of all time. I'm not sure I agree with the list. I'm not gonna give in to hyperbole and say it's utter bullshit, IGN.
Well, you were reading me some of the games there and some of the very highly rated games, and the list didn't make sense because so long story short, like I proposed the idea and got it going where we did top 10 lists, video games, and so we've been doing these lists ourselves to merriment and argument. And the thing is that this happened a lot on the PS2 when we were making the list, and I said, okay, well, this game, someone suggests a game. I say, okay, but there's a better version of this game elsewhere. Should we really be putting it on this list? And a lot and people got mad that I cut out so many, or that my argument was doing. I'm like, well, yeah, because it's like, okay, especially if they came out at the same time. It's like, the big one was everyone was clamoring, where is Resident Evil 4? Why isn't Resident Evil 4 on your PS2 list? Because Resident Evil 4 sucks on PS2.
It's amazing on GameCube.
So, we're not putting it on there. And one or two people might say, but there was more content. I'm like, but it played worse. You just moved worse. It looked worse. It controlled worse. It had less things. Like if you were playing Mercenaries, it actually didn't spawn chickens. Now, why is that important? Because chickens drop grenades. So you actually use that in an actual legitimate strategy for getting the best scores on levels, which you can't even do on a PS2 because it literally doesn't spawn things that are supposed to drop at extra weapons and grenades and stuff. So.
And I loved the PS2. Genuinely loved the PS2. But didn't RE4 launch on the GameCube?
Yeah, like 9 months ahead of time, like 9 months earlier. So
it's a GameCube game.
It's a GameCube game.
That eventually
whenever we get to our GameCube list, it's going to be number one.
Yeah,
that's kind of not even. I made a game. I made a GameCube list of my own. I've done it, and I put it at number one. So
yeah, I don't want to go down the whole list, but as an introduction to the PlayStation anniversary episode, like their top 10, number 10 is Baldur's Gate 3.
I don't understand that because it's just a more complete package on PC because of the modding community. And they accept and embrace the modding community. Also, I believe, oh man, I really don't want to get into this.
It was early access on PC long before it was on PlayStation.
And I was gonna say
it's censored on PlayStation. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to go down that road, which I'm usually trying to avoid because usually sheds or whatever. But here's the thing: you cannot have a big floppy donkey-sized dragon dick on a PlayStation 5, but you can on PC.
Censorship within reason for good reasons doesn't bother. Censorship for no reason or for reasons to not offend a very specific group, evangelists. That I have a problem with, but okay, you can't have dicks on a PlayStation because PlayStation is more expected than PC to be in the hands of children. All right, I'm not going to get super mad, but then number 9 is Grand Theft Auto 5/Online. All right, we could argue about that one, but then number 7's Red Dead Redemption 2. Did that launch on PlayStation?
Yeah, it did. It was PlayStation first, PlayStation and Xbox first, and then
why do I think of it as
later? Oh no, it did not come out on PC for a while, but it's also Red Dead Redemption 2. And look, man, I don't know. This is where it's here's my disconnect with the critical side of gaming, or the media side, where it is an extremely impressive. If we're talking about like just impressive amounts of programming options, graphics, things like just you're talking about like this game had the most mechanics and systems, and I mean not even player mechanics. I mean just like mechanics of like how your horse gets dirty, you have to clean your rifle, the balls on the horse shrink in the winter or whatever the hell,
Yeah.
'cause that's actually a thing. Uh, yeah, it's one of the most impressive games ever made. It's not fun to play.
Yeah,
It's nowhere near as fun to play as the first one.
the
So
best time that well, the first one is probably got to be in one of my top 10 games of all time.
I mean,
We'd have to,
I could honestly sit there and be like, yeah, sure, Red Dead 1, if
yeah.
that was number 7.
I,
2?
here's You got to find the one thing within Red Dead Redemption 2 that you really enjoy doing, and then go about like balls hard into that. And that is how you enjoy it. Now, does that make it a good game? I don't know. We could debate that, but that's how you enjoy that. I want to end this segment where we're talking about IGN because I don't want to I don't know, start a blood feud with them.
Nobody
They're just
cares.
yeah, I know, not even the people at IGN.
Everyone hates
Um,
IGN.
their justification for this is uh what games do you see when you close your eyes and hear the word PlayStation? Well, we've got a lot of exclusives on this list. We, of course, have to include a fair few multi platform classics as well. Our rule of thumb for this is if when you think of that game, you see a PlayStation banner at the top of its box, if so, it qualifies here. That doesn't, so if you owned a PlayStation when that game came out, then it qualifies because that doesn't because I don't think anybody ever has sat there and would go like, "Oh yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, classic PlayStation game."
No.
Like that's a PC game. That's like saying Skyrim is the ultimate Xbox game or something, or it's like everyone knows that the
I
best
mean, at
version
least
of
you can
Skyrim.
argue there, like, well, I mean, not at the time when it came out, but you can
Mm.
argue like, hey, it's a Microsoft first party game.
Well,
It
yeah,
is.
okay, yeah, that maybe that's a bad example. My point is like the best version of that game is on PC.
Yeah.
I would argue, I don't know. I think you get into weird waters when you try to claim a multi-platform as the best of, a certain
I mean,
platform.
certain games are just better on, say, a certain platform. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
you
absolutely.
you have like say Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I think 1 was on Dreamcast or 2 was on Dreamcast for sure. And you would say Dreamcast is the best version of that game. Absolutely. There is a version of it on the original Xbox, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which very little people know about. Um, but
Well, not a
again,
lot of people played the original Xbox to begin with. So,
yeah, so you're just not going to sit there and, well, I mean, and people would say like, well, I think of PlayStation when I think of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. And I'm like, true, but like the Dreamcast version was definitely much better.
yeah, I don't know. It just seems like such a murky. But it's like they wanted to make a list of their favorite 100 games. That's
Yeah, it's just 100
what
games.
they did.
It's just 100. Well, it's literally our 100 favorite games of all times, excluding Nintendo. That's all this is.
Yeah. Holy shit, that's true. You know what? I will say, maybe I'm salty. I should be fair. I'm salty because Ape Escape is number 100, and Siphon Filter's like
That's the 100th.
85. Yeah, they're dead last in the top 100. Now, okay, they did include it in the top 100. There's been a lot of games, and including in the top 100. All right, making it dead last over like Crash Team Racing. Crash Team
Crash Team
Racing is like
Racing's very good.
Crash Team Racing's number 99 though.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Like
I would have
a
thought that would
bunch
have
of
been
my
high.
favorites are
Dang. Okay,
in the
that's kind of
bottom.
low. Like, yeah, I would say Ape Escape is probably better than Siphon Filter.
Yeah, Ape Escape is one oh, okay. Spyro 2 is 98. Tearaway is 97. They put Tearaway above several. Deathloop is number 96. Jack 2, I gotta get Jack 2. Loco Roco is 94. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is 93.
He
Like,
seems very low for some very beloved games.
right, 91 is Siphon Filter. Nino Cooney Wrath of the White Witch is number 90 though, so I guess that's kind of I know a couple people who love Nino Cooney.
I
Uh,
mean, on the DS, it's significantly better.
Yeah. Well, we have a great side quest talking about our favorite DS games. That's a side quest request we got. Horizon Zero Dawn is 87. Like it's just Doom Eternal is 86. This list makes no sense, is what I'm getting at. Like it's just Kingdom Hearts 2 for our Kingdom Hearts fans is number 83.
Wow, that's low for Kingdom Hearts 2.
Right? You have Monster Hunter World's 82. They put Medal of Honor Frontline on here, 81. Like Killzone 2 is 79.
That's higher than Kingdom Hearts, Killzone 2.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth is 78. Under Ridge Racer Type 4, which is 77.
Yeah, this list is whatever. This is a complete nonsense list.
It's like they were just like, let's make a list of games generally, well regarded, whatever.
So you were like, I don't know, I want to say 6 when PlayStation 1 first came out.
What year did PlayStation 1 come out?
95.
95. I was
Like
7.
Fall 95.
I was 7, fresh
Somewhere
from my
around
dad's balls.
sorry to date you so hard there.
The stink of scrotes still.
Stink of scrotes. So my question for you is, do you remember seeing this thing for the first time? Do you remember like do you have any like coming into contact with this weird system when you were a youngin'?
So I had 2 first times seeing it. The very first time that I ever saw it, period, was in a McDonald's.
Really?
Yeah, it was one of the new McDonald's that had opened that had like a 3-story play place, and at the bottom of the play place it had like game consoles in those like weird plexiglass bubble thing. Like I saw one there, and no, maybe I have it backwards, because one of my cousins got one, like won one at a school raffle thing. And it was a real shame because the only game they ever got was the Crash Party game was the only game they ever
Crash
played on.
Bash? Bro, that
Yeah,
was like at the end. That was at the end of the console's life.
Yeah, they had other games, but the only game we ever played at my cousin's was this game. Is what I'm saying. Like,
I'm like, did you not play a PlayStation until like 99 or 2000?
No, I played it, but like they got one and just like that's why I'm saying it was tragic. Like they got one and just never played it.
Just
Like,
left it there.
Yeah, they had unboxed it. That was the first, and they didn't have a game when they had first, or did they have? I can't remember if they had a game when they first got it. But like the first time I saw one was at a cousin's house, and then the only game I ever remember playing with them was years later was Crash
Bash. Okay.
And we might have played Crash Team Racing because they liked Crash, but it turns out that a PlayStation for 2 tween girls. I know maybe it was the wrong audience, but they wanted a raffle, so I mean it's sick raffle. But then I think the first time that I played one was at a McDonald's, and then we got one eventually, but I think we didn't get one until like 97. I think we got one for Final Fantasy 7. Maybe. Because again, fresh from my dad's balls, my memory's all jumbled there. We also got everything out of order. Like we got things
right. Yeah.
We got things differently than how people got things. Just
and we recently had an episode talking about the insanity that was 94. So if you were following the game industry 30 years ago, like it was just nuts. And then it was still pretty nuts even into 95 when Saturn and PlayStation showed up in American shores, which is kind of like why I was asking.
I was not following it at 6 years old.
I mean, I was following it as well enough as a kid could, basically just reading magazines at the, your mom would go to the market to shop, and then you just go and sit in the magazine section and just read game magazines.
Yeah, like VGM, was that the one that died first? EGM died first. Which one was the one that like died first though? The first magazine to die, I feel like, is the one that I would read all the time.
There was Game Fan, but you probably didn't see that at the market very much. There was I can't remember what it was, but there was a magazine even in the 90s, even in the early 90s, that used profanity when other magazines, even EGM, didn't really do that. I forget what it was called.
Decent chance that was one I was reading. Do you remember that little video store that was across the street from where I grew up? in those like blue condos.
Yeah.
Like that, they would every month would get like a selection of the magazines because they also rented games. They were not cheap to rent games from though, but they were a little bit cheaper than Blockbuster, I guess, maybe. But they were not particularly cheap, and they did not have a selection. No one ever rented games from them though, and so like my brother would go in and try and haggle with the guy for rental prices. Like nobody's gonna rent Pilot Wings. Just let me rent it for like half the price. You can't haggle with a small business owner who doesn't understand games generally, but he's like, that was $50. I'm getting my money's worth. Um, but yeah, no, I that's pretty much the extent of me following it. I don't think I really started paying attention to games like actually paying attention to like I don't think I became a fan, let's say.
Hmm.
Like I played games. My brother was very into games, but I don't think I really started to play games a lot until like the year 2000.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit earlier than that, but
Yeah,
like
I guess the big question I asked this is for me, it was significant. My first memory of seeing a PlayStation in the wild was at KB Toys.
ooh,
'Cause
solid.
they would just have demo units kind of just out around
Yeah,
the big
yeah.
counter that they had this big giant counter for paying for, whatever toys, but like there was
Yeah.
no one they never used the full counter. Like they only ever usually had one
Well, that's
person
why
ringing
KB
anywhere.
Toys isn't around anymore.
Right, because they had this counter for purchase counter that was like made for like six people, and they only ever had one person there.
Yeah.
So like the one end of it was always they would just put a bunch of little TVs and game
Yeah.
consoles up there because the games were behind them on the shelves behind them because they were expensive or whatever.
Mhm.
Until they went to the bargain bin right in front. Anyways, that's where I first saw a PlayStation. And I distinctly remember the first time seeing the controller and just being like, okay, proverbially as a youngin, because I was a good Christian boy. I probably never would have said this. Well, I definitely eventually I would have, but at the time I wouldn't have. But what the fuck is this? was was basically my first thought when I grabbed the controller. I saw it and picked it up, and I'm like, what? Just Joe Pesci in Crypt Keeper. Just what the fuck is this piece of shit?
It's
Just
I
a,
want to
a
say
disjointed D-pad, shapes instead of letters, four shoulder buttons, and all of them were little tiny ones on the original.
yeah.
And these big these weird spikes that you're holding.
I I don't remember. I think the first place I ever saw a DualShock, like like a PlayStation, because that was at the end of PlayStation 1, right? Was when a DualShock came out.
Mid. It was about middle of
Mid
life.
was at a Toys R Us.
Hmm.
And for some reason I thought it was a total because you didn't see I just saw the controller, so I thought it was like a totally new system. Like I thought it
Oh.
was PlayStation 2. And I
Oh,
remember getting
okay.
this huge argument with my brother. Um, and I mean, like, knock down, drag out. We're gonna go to blows over this thing because, like, I held it in my hand, asshole. Like, but yeah, that was the first time I saw DualShock because Toys R Us had like a corral.
Right,
Like
yeah.
you went into its own little corral to try things. Best Buy did that for a while too, but yeah, and like the original PlayStation was weird because it didn't look like a game console to me.
Mhm.
Like the very original PlayStation looked more like a true DVD player, or like a computer.
It definitely had a weird AV equipment something to it.
Yeah, there was just some like it looked. I don't know. I like when I think of gaming consoles of the '90s, I do think toy. Like a lot of it was designed toy. One of the reasons that I thought this like Genesis was so cool was by comparison, it was sleek.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it looked like a big piece of like a audio equipment or something.
right. And especially like you could get these specialty boxes of them where like the system sat in it and you could route all the
Mhm.
cabling in it and then it had all
Yeah.
your games lined up and when you open the thing the games like
Yeah.
escalated up and so like you could do
Yeah,
that.
I do remember that, yeah.
And that was the type of case we had, and it was meant to, like, sit in front of your TV or on top of your TV because we had that those, like, big ass TVs that looked like big stereos? They had,
Mhm.
like, the wooden cabinetry. That was the first TV we had in Like, it was my grandparents' old TV. It sat on the floor. He ended
Yeah.
up using it as a computer desk for like 10 years after it died. Um, but like on top of that was our huge Genesis. So, game consoles weren't necessarily sleek at the time. And then when the PlayStation, it was like this at the time, I considered it bland. Now there's almost a nostalgia for it where it's like, oh
Yeah.
man, it was a cool design actually.
Well, there's an interesting thing to say there because going with the design, I think there's like a mentality where early on, it was like Nintendo made you think video games are toys. It was kind of by design. And then Sega was like, all right, let's get the teens involved. And then PlayStation was a little bit like, let's get the older teens, young adults involved.
Right.
Like it kind of felt like each one went after like an older demographic. And Nintendo just stayed in its ways. Like, yeah, whatever, we have kids.
Well, yeah, and in a way, I think Nintendo was incredibly smart in that aspect where like
Yeah, I mean,
they stuck to their guns
well,
and
they
it's
also
obviously
did.
working out for them.
Yeah, they did what they had to do at the time, especially in the mid '80s, which was to reintroduce video gaming.
Right.
And video gaming initially was introduced as audio video. It was not a toy aisle thing. It was the Atari is not
Right.
considered was not considered a toy. They considered this a audio visual thing. This is like a Betamax player, a VHS player. This
Yeah.
is something that goes with your television. And after they fizzled out in North America, Nintendo did the smart thing and went, okay, well, let's sell it as a toy. Let's put it in the toy aisle with
Uh,
Rob the robot, and
right.
that's how they won their way back in to the mindset of people was through the boys toy aisle.
There was also this thing with Atari that like it was like a man's thing.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. This is
it,
kind of
it
like
had wood
your
paneling and
yeah, your dad would have a snifter of brandy and a cigar, and he'd be like, hey,
oh,
watching his
damn.
watching his kid play some sort of Space Invaders while he stares at his wife's ass or something.
Yeah, some of the marketing for it that I remember is like hot women on posters with an Atari. Or like there was an Atari
Mhm.
was it no, it wasn't Atari that had like you remember that arcade cabinet that had the big marble ball to
Yeah,
manipulate and like was that running
there's
on
a
an Atari?
lot of games had trackballs.
Yeah, but it was
But
like
yes, there was a trackball for Atari. Yes.
yeah, okay, it was like the but it was like I remember this I can vaguely see this like magazine page talking about like how it was like a heavy marble premium quality like it was like in an arcade cabinet type deal.
Yeah.
Like it was selling how like heavy duty this marble,
Yeah.
and it was like
Okay.
it was I can picture it had like lighting to make it look like it was a centerpiece on, like, a coffee table, like, you could have
Yeah.
totally had, like, a cigar or something, right?
Hmm.
And that's what it was selling it on, and it's like, that to me encapsulates how I thought of Atari as a kid,
Hmm.
where, like, it seemed like this is not something I wanna play with, this is just whatever. Like, this is, like, my dad's thing, and I want the Nintendo.
It,
You know,
it,
I want the NES.
it was my grunkle's thing because he had it in a den.
Yeah,
'Cause
what was, like I miss dens.
But he had a den with like wood panel walls,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
shag carpet,
Oh my god, yes.
and then this big AV video, system around a TV, big
Mhm.
with big giant speakers I mean, it was wood finish and then it became more metallic, but
Did we have the same grunkle? Like, I went on this trip when I don't know how old I was. I was probably like 10. We went to, Lake Havasu. My dad was, like, so amped to go to Lake Havasu. I later found out people like to party in Lake Havasu,
Oh
and my
yeah.
dad had some sort of fever dream from the '80s where he was like, "Lake Havasu, it's a great place to go." Is it with kids? I
No.
don't know. But he had an uncle there, so I guess it really literally was a grunkle. And they literally when they pawned us off on them to go like do stuff around Lake Havasu for a day without the kids, we hung out in a den with orange shag carpeting, wood paneled walls, and a fucking Atari. And then I wasn't used to heat on the level that we hit in Arizona, so I got dehydrated and threw up all over the shag carpeting.
Oh no.
And you cannot get that shit out. Vomit and semen stain shag carpeting forever. That's for life, folks. Okay. Now, shag carpeting is beautiful and nostalgic because it's so comfortable. Shag carpeting is actual hell if you ever clean your carpet. If you don't, cool.
If you want a bacterial cesspool under your feet.
Yeah. It just like your house permanently smells like weird dog. Because I, d- I, don't- I actually have sort of a nostalgia for shag carpet because it was so comfortable and like when we were little, you nap time. If you were on shag carpet, it was pretty cool. But if you're on wood floor, for some reason, like in the 80s, it was either marble or shag carpeting. Like that's all anybody had in their house. Like nobody would let the kids sleep on the weird black leather couch that everybody had in the 80s.
There was a weird push towards like marble shit and wallpaper in the
Yeah,
80s.
marble and then like glass furniture with like plush leather couches that nobody wanted children or dogs or living beings on. Like the 80s had some weird shit as always, and then like squares of color, just random shapes of color on things. But yeah, so you always went for the shag carpeting at nap time. I have a distinct memory being like 3 or 4 years old and like fighting for a corner of shag carpeting at nap time. I was born in the fire. But yeah, so enough about terrible memories of Lake Havasu. Um,
You just weren't old enough to have the good ones.
yeah, that is fair. I don't want to go on another tangent. I had another tangent all about Lake Havasu, but
Well, okay.
um,
So one of the best things to come out of this 30th anniversary
like,
is a Eurogamer interview with Sean Layden,
oh
um,
yeah,
former PlayStation exec, and I you got to go to Eurogamer, read the whole thing. I don't want to pull every. I don't want to like I'm not going to repeat the whole thing because there's a lot of good stuff in there.
it's not
Um,
scraped for content.
R but, he sheds light on a little corner of history that I think is well, for me, is particularly fascinating, and it's how PlayStation got Final Fantasy, or the final nail on how they got it. Um, and he said, "Okay, so PlayStation got Final Fantasy not because of Sony Electronics, but because of Sony Music." And here's how he sort of set it up. He was saying, in the interview, he says, initial stage was a joint venture between Sony Electronics and Sony Music. Half the company was from the music side, and well, you could see it on the shop floor at 8 a.m. So he's talking about like Sony headquarters in Japan. All the hardware engineers were at their desks wearing their Sony vests, working on their engineering thing. And then around 10 through 11 a.m., within that hour, all the Sony music guys would come in, hungover, sunglasses, cigarettes hanging out of their mouths. They'd look at the Nikkei paper for the newspaper for 45 minutes, drink a cup of tea, and then go, all right, lunch. And they'd all stand up and they'd all leave. And we wouldn't see them again for the rest of the day because Sony Music populated sales, marketing, advertising, publisher relations. They did all that. So those were the guys who would go out with the people at Square and ply them with whiskey until the wee hours of the morning to finally get Final Fantasy VII off of Nintendo and onto PlayStation. And he says when the announcement was made, there's really the oh my god moment. Sony was serious about this now, and that's down to the music guys, the doggedness of just trying to get a deal over the line. They were amazing.
So at one point in time, I almost became the devil. Sorry, a management consultant, fresh out of college. And one of the funniest things that was said to me in the interviewing process was they asked me if I drank. And I was like, well, yes. And they were like, okay, good. Because under no circumstances, as a management consultant, we can teach you all the business side and everything like that. Because I did not go to business school. We can teach you all that. Under no circumstances are you to ever say no to going to drinks after hours with a client. Everything else can be forgiven. But if you do not go drinking with the client after work, you will fail at your job. So it's the number one for sales on a corporate level or like billable hours and stuff. Gotta go drinking hard. Now we know someone who is a consultant, and they're technically a technology consultant. They technically build the advanced technological infrastructure for major companies. Companies I won't name, but they're very, very big companies. Uh, a third of his position, a third of his time on assignment when he was still traveling before he became management was drinking after hours. So
Yeah, yeah, he told me this. He said, yeah, he was saying most of his job ended up being like going out drinking after hours.
and I mean like getting wasted because it was on client's dime. It's all billed to the client. And so what it was ways for these mid-level management to go get drunk on the company's dime because it counted as a business because the consultant's company would bill it as expenses and the company would pay it. So at the end of the night, you're the
So,
consultant, you pick up the tab, however long these C-suite or whatever, clients want to be out there. You're there, you pick up the tab, and then they just rebill that to the corporation after. So yeah, sales is weird. So all those music guys, like, yeah, all right, they're coming in at 10, but they technically don't finish work until 3 a.m. most nights. So I guess let them get away with it.
well, that's the crazy thing, which also made me. It's almost also crazy to me to think how Sony Music was making all the money in the company at the time. And again, go into the article, and it basically talks about how PlayStation became like one of the most important branches of the Sony.
And now it
Um,
is the most important branch of the
right.
Sony Empire, them and movies, right?
Yeah, and he talks about the moment where Nintendo backstabbed them at CES in '93, like literally like hours before. You know, it's more just, hey, here's like a firsthand account from stuff that you kind of already knew. There's one thing that I thought was actually really really interesting, and he was talking about how he in from the executive level, how he was convincing them, how he talked his way, or how Sony talked his way into a philosophy within Sony during the early PlayStation days. And his basically the way he sold PlayStation, or they sold, I guess the whole team was, they're like, we're not trying to take the largest share of the pie from Nintendo and Sega. He says, we're going to make the pie bigger. So he said, rather than just try to like eat out someone's market share, we're going to make the market bigger.
Yeah.
And there's a really great, and it almost sounds like a little damning, um in a way, with regards to current day. See if I can get the exact, because there's an exact quote here which makes it, I think, really really important. I'm not seeing it now, but I guess I'll paraphrase here,
Well, yeah, okay.
where he was saying that to make the pie bigger, we needed, oh, here's this. Like, our first party responsibility was to grow the pie overall. And as pie gets bigger, everyone's slice gets bigger, so everyone's happy. Growing the market overall meant creating new types of games, new genres of games, and not competing in this some of the standard genre categories. And so you got game like Parappa the Rapper, you got games like SingStar, Eco, Shadow of the Colossus. Who's going to make those games? It was a first party imperative to show, firstly, the power of the platform, and secondly, the endless categories we could build games into. We weren't just trapped into three genres and trying to fight for market share from each other, which that last part to me sounds like kind of a bit of a backhanded compliment, or not a backhand, but like kind of like a pointed, dart thrown at both the modern day Sony and the modern game industry in general.
Yeah, that sounds like he's backhandedly criticizing the current problems as old problems. Uh, One interesting thing I would note is that the two largest expansions of the industry, or at least the game market, in my opinion, happened because of the 360 and Nintendo. Did they happen because did like the Nintendo
Martin,
Switch expanded the market pretty heavily? Like people that I had never heard of playing games ever were suddenly
the
all about
way
games.
the way okay, if we want to talk about market expansion, I think
Or the Wii
it's
expanded
more
the market.
I would say it's more. PS2 is the biggest market expander, honestly. Although the PlayStation 1 did sell 100 million, over 100 million consoles. which is more than the Famicom and Nintendo did.
Right.
So the PlayStation absolutely grew the market 100%. But I think I would say the PlayStation 1's, it grew the market by more or less, I think, just sort of lassoing in the teens and the young adults who are growing out of gaming and said, "Hey, no, 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 wait. We still have games for you."
It also has the
Um,
best name for marketing of all the systems.
PlayStation.
Yeah, it's these. What is it? It's the PlayStation. Like
Yeah.
your boomer ass parents know what it was, know what it is. Like you don't really have to explain it. Marketing wise,
Because
they have the best.
because he's right when he's talking about a game like Parappa, but again, like SingStar and Eco and Shadow of the Colossus, those are PS2 games. So the thing is, PS2, I think, is the true market grower because of the DVD player. The damn DVD player, that thing is what expanded gaming because um
That's yeah,
to me that was the biggest explosion of growing the market. He did grow the market, but he was more like, because Nintendo has kind of always had this sort of Pokemon mentality where it's like, we're here for you from 6 to 11. And when you grow up, we just go back to the next group of 6 to 11 upcoming. They just kind of like constantly like are in the 6 to 11 range. And they're
yeah. They
fine with that because,
expected you to grow out of gaming,
yeah, like it didn't seem like Nintendo particularly cared if
right?
people outgrew gaming so much. Sega was like, let's go after the teens because the kids who were 6 to 11, 85 to 90 are going to be teenagers now, and we're going to make teenage stuff cool for them. So Sega Genesis, it's the
Road
teenage
rage.
machine. And then PlayStation was like, all right, well, let's get the 18 to 25 crowd. So it was more just kind of like, I would say PlayStation 1, it grew the market, but it also was more or less just keeping those kids from the 80s still hooked into video games in the late 90s.
Yeah, it
Then
might be.
I think PS2 is where it's like, okay, everyone wants a DVD player.
Yeah,
You're one of the early DVD players. You're actually one of the cheaper options for a DVD player early on, because a lot of people were charging out the butt for a DVD player in the
yeah.
early
Well,
2000s.
because VHS was very expensive. Its
Yeah,
entire life, VHS was
yeah,
expensive.
and the thing is I actually got some super uber discount DVD player from Target for like $70 in like 2000, 2001 or something like that, somehow on some crazy Christmas. And it was some you've never heard of it kind of brand. And that thing never died, actually.
Yeah,
Somehow it worked forever.
I
So
got the first DVD player I think I ever got was like a portable, with like one of those little screens on it. And it was like my grandparents thought it was like they thought it was the future. They thought people would only watch movies on little screens. Those idiots. Well, okay, but we're still fighting that fight. But yeah.
my phone.
Um but yeah, that DVD player still works to this day. I found it when we went to move cross country. Found it after years. I mean, it was beat to hell. I watched, I think I watched all of the Band of Brothers when I got the DVD set.
There you go.
It is old. It is like 22 years old
Yeah.
or 20. I don't know, but that thing still works. And it's just a no name brand. There's no name on it. Like I don't know what the hell it is.
Hmm.
Amazing, and the batteries still work for it. You can still watch DVDs, full DVD movies wireless. So that not say it was meant for road trips.
Good Lord. But yeah, I think my mom had one of those too. Yeah, yeah, I would say the market expanded really with PS2. Like PS1 started. I don't want to downplay it too much, but I think that damn DVD player that really brought it mainstream. But Sean also talks about this a little bit in this interview, and he said a big one was the early Wipeout, the first Wipeout game. And he
Yeah.
says, in London, I would come on over on business to go to Sony Liverpool and see the guys up there, which Sony shut down recently. And we'd be going to clubs during that time. And I see PlayStation 1 kiosks with Wipeout in nightclubs. You got your vodka Red Bull in one hand and you're playing Wipeout in with the other. It was the beginnings of making gaming into a lifestyle, the beginnings of making it something where gaming is more than just a distraction. All of a sudden, gaming became less something whispered about in pubs and more you overhearing someone say, "Oh, I'm playing Tomb Raider." "Oh, Tomb Raider? Do you play games? That's cool." So a little tooting his own horn there, but I get what he's saying there. Especially with games like Wipeout and Tomb Raider, which were huge in the UK. They're huge here too. Honestly, it's just that like they kind of fizzled out in America.
Right.
Uh, so,
Well, yeah, I would say. What year do you think that was that he's talking about? Did he say what year that was?
well,
I
if
mean,
he's talking
Tomb
about the
Raider.
first, if he's talking about Tomb Raider, well, he's talking about 96. He's talking about
96.
96.
See, I would say that is much earlier than when I feel like gaming truly, like around 360 launch is when everyone I knew started talking about games, like started talking about games.
But I think that's for the because of the PS2
Right. Yeah, oh, yeah, I
and sort
definitely
of the
do. But like
DVD thing.
uh, 2007, yeah, 2007 is the first time that like I heard people at school lunch just randomly like walking by heard people talking about video
Mhm.
games. Like it was not like you're a friggin' nerd like that was it was just commonplace. Like when I was in junior high, you'd get ridiculed, you'd get mocked for being a gamer. Or they'd write gamer. Oh, he's a gamer, and they'd write GAYMER. Oh, yeah. But like now, you're a gamer, and it's like, yeah, so is fucking everybody. You know, um,
Yeah, 'cause I think that's literally the name of a website too for for LGBT.
LGBTQ.
Yeah,
Yeah, hell yeah, I
yeah.
bet. Um, the the point is like we've gotten better at insults. That's the point of it. No, um, but my point is like it's around 2007 that I feel like is when I started noticing people. I'm not saying that that's what caused it, but 360 is the first console that like I everyone I knew
I think at
had one.
that point, like
The
there had been
Wii
a
is the first console
yeah
that like literally everybody I knew had one. Like I
yeah
mean
that came out in 2006. So
everybody had one.
yeah, even though the Wii itself didn't sell as much as the PS2, which Sean actually on Twitter confirmed the final production count of the PS2 is 160.6 units were produced.
Okay.
Um,
Well, how come it always increases? Every year it's always just
right?
a couple million more.
Everyone's. It's funny because like everyone's saying this, like, because Sony did this recently where they put out a statement. We sold over 160 million. And then here's the thing: a lot of people are saying like, this has nothing to do with Nintendo about to catch up. I'm like, yes, it does.
It
First of all,
always somehow adjusts.
yeah.
Alright.
So yeah, apparently the final production number is 160.6 for PS2. I don't know why Sony, because here's the thing: there's no reason for Sony to have hid that for so long. Where they were releasing numbers when up to 155, and they just stopped for some reason. And now that Nintendo's about to get there, it's like it's 160 actually. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, shut up. Release Bloodborne. Get the fuck out of here. Did you see that? It's about persistence.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it, but I tweeted about that on Blue Sky.
Oh no, they're called queefs.
They're called queefs on Blue
Yeah,
Sky. No,
you
they're not.
queefed it.
No, I
You put a queef out into the world.
no, sure, queef.
Release the
It's,
queef.
it's definitely not called a queef, but
It's 100% called queefing, requeefing.
no, it isn't. But
It's not called a thread. It's a string of queefs.
it's not a string of queefs. But either way, I queefed it out.
Rapid fire queefing.
Saying where I was just kind of like, okay, this is stupid. Like at this point, like they're turning into trolls at this point. If they don't have a remaster for its 10th anniversary, they're assholes. Just straight up, they're assholes.
Well, if they're
Uh,
buying FromSoft, maybe maybe they will have one.
like, because the thing is, like, okay, they don't need FromSoft to do a remaster of Bloodborne. They have
No.
many studios like Bluepoint, chief amongst them, that could do a remaster or a remake
Would
of Bloodborne.
anybody play? Would anybody play a Souls game that isn't FromSoft?
They did. They made Demon Souls. Where Bluepoint made Demon Souls remake. So yes,
Bluepoint did the demon. Oh, that was pretty well regarded.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. It's just like I'm trying to think. What are all there has to be some. They want money. They love money. So there has to be some legal reason why they haven't been able to.
Nobody knows. Nobody gets it. It's so weird because it sold like I think 7 or 8 million copies. lifetime for Bloodborne. And one of the, if I think it was Insomniac leak or something from the leaks, we actually learned the final number from Bloodborne, and it was pretty good. It was definitely good enough to where you would think, yeah, remaster, remake, certainly more than Sackboy's Big Adventure or even Until Dawn or whatever.
What are you
So,
talking about? Until Dawn's a classic. It's number 6 on the 100. No, I don't.
oh my god,
It's on here. It's got to be on here.
7.46 million. Um, so there you go.
Okay.
So that's plenty. That's plenty of copies to justify a remaster.
Oh, I'm so annoyed. They have Resident Evil on 29 on this list. I don't know why I have it open. It's just to make me mad. Same reason anybody stays on Twitter now. Just to be mad.
Oh man, I don't know. Like it's funny too. Most of my feed on Twitter has just died. It's just weird Lythero fucking um weird Lythero shit now. Sorry, Lythero. All your weird artist buddies and all their weird like whatever TikTok crap, cocaine crap, whatever it is with Sonic. It's just all weird. It's just all weird Sonic memes from Lythero. That's all I get on Twitter feed now. Everyone else is left. It's just this weird hell of like of dictatorship propaganda and weird Sonic YouTube poop equivalent of Sonic memes. So
Fair enough. If you're not
which
on
I
Blue
guess
Sky, get on Blue Sky.
I guess that was always going to be the end goal or end game anyways, right?
I feel like there's well, all social media is supposed to die. The fact that it hung on this long is amazing. Social media is supposed to come in cycles. Old people are supposed to cycle off. And
That
end up
being
with
said,
Facebook.
that being
retirement.
said, I hope so. One can only hope and pray. But for as far as PlayStation memories, this is PlayStation. Do you have a favorite game for just sort of the general PlayStation? Like when you think PlayStation,
The original PlayStation.
original or I guess anything. I would say
Oh,
original.
Ape Escape. I played the shit out of it. Ape Escape, Crash Team Racing was a big one because we played it so much, but that was so late. And um, I'm trying to think. Final Fantasy VII, definitely because I didn't play the original Final Fantasy VII. I didn't play. I watched my brother play through it, and he put like 100 and some odd hours into that, and so like I have like a weird nostalgia for it, even though I never played the original.
Do you remember the first game you played on it? And I know you were kind of like iffy on first time
No,
you saw it. I remember the first game I played was ESPN Extreme. Later renamed One Extreme and re-released without any ESPN branding on it.
maybe it was a Spyro.
Hmm.
I don't know
All the way in
when
98.
did Spyro come out in 98?
98.
Wow, okay, then it wasn't Spyro. No, it's I don't know. I honestly don't know. I feel like all the iconic ones that I played enough. I don't know if I remember my first one. One of my first games that I ever played though ever on the NES was the Terminator game. And
I'm
mostly
sorry.
it's anger that makes me remember it. Yeah.
I'm
Like
sorry. Jeez.
like that game was that cartridge died, and my brother was mad because he never got to beat it because it's terrible and takes. But he was mad, and I remember being just so happy that that cartridge died. never had to, never had to try again.
Peace.
Um,
It's funny too because there's a game called Journey to Silas on the NES, which was a rebranded. You can play it on the NSO now on the Switch Online, and it's a Sunsoft game. And they lost the Terminator license while making the game, and it went to whatever that other probably Euro trash company made it. And Journey to Silas is excellent, and you could totally see where they did very a few modifications to make it a not Terminator game anymore. But yeah, I would recommend playing the real Terminator game on NES if you ever wanted to like you would have been so significantly less frustrated if that released as the Terminator and you got to play that instead.
I probably would have. It was so bad that it left a bad taste in my mouth for the franchise of Terminator for like a good long while. That's how bad that game
You
is.
know what's weird too is apparently the best version of the Terminator is on Sega CD.
Huh.
Yeah, yeah, right.
That's one. I mean, I never owned a Sega CD.
Nobody did.
Oddly enough, I had a cousin that owned a Sega CD. Um, like it was like gifted to him for like he has severe Downs,
Hmm.
and it was gifted to him by a well-meaning but clearly not understanding relative at
Yeah,
some
because
point.
Sega CD was like a weird. I don't know. The games were very weird. The games are confusing for anyone.
Yeah,
Some.
like it wasn't something like so it never really got it was hooked up, but it wasn't something that anybody played. So I've seen a Sega CD, but
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of like first get definitely not first games, but one of my favorite games on an original PlayStation is maybe 98 was the year. Isn't Final Fantasy Tactics from 97, 98?
It's either late '97. I think it's early '98.
Cuz like so cuz I think we must have got our own PlayStation in like 97.
Yeah, 7 came out in like August '97 in America.
Right. So I think a lot of the games because my first time playing when did the original Crash Bandicoot
'96.
96? I'm trying to think like what I would have played in that McDonald's.
Probably Crash 1 or 2, maybe even if it
Yeah,
was late enough.
I'm guessing.
Could be Jumping Flash. I remember Toys R Us in particular, and even KB because at KB I played One Extreme or ESPN Extreme, and at Toys R Us I played Jumping Flash on a PlayStation.
Well, like most of my PlayStation memories and like my biggest time of being a huge PlayStation fan was PS2. Like I have so many PS2 games that like I couldn't even be. We had a huge, we had a literal trunk full by the time the PS2 died.
Hmm.
You know, and so I sometimes when I think of PS1 games, I mix up because like part of me wanted to be like Time Splitters, like, but I'm
PS2.
yeah, I played that and like Time Splitters 2 is obviously well, I don't know if I would say if it's obviously better, but I like Time Splitters 2 more than Time Splitters 1, and that was of
uh,
course PS2.
yes.
Yeah, well, I don't
two
know.
is two
Sometimes
is an actual full game. One is basically just multiplayer.
yeah, well, you never really know with people. It's sometimes I say the most like milk a toast opinion on here, and that'll be what sets everybody off. Like, I'll say the most middle of the road mayonnaise ass thing, and somebody be like, "Wow, he believes in genocide." All right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like PlayStation. Oh, I mean, the original Grand Theft Auto. I played too much of.
The top down one?
Yeah, yeah, and
Oh,
the specifically the London version.
the
What year did that
London
one come in?
missions. That was bro. That was like mid. I was like, what the?
95, 96.
No, 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 no. It was way later than that. Uh, when did the London 90?
Like, I played the shit out of both, but the London one is the one that I played, like, a lot of because I knew all the
Um,
cheats. I knew all the cheats by heart, like the guns of the Navarone to get all the guns.
funny in Japan, in not Japan, in Europe, the game is called GTA Grand Theft Auto London 1969.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
version I had. London
uh,
1969.
that came out in '99.
Hot damn. I played a lot of that. Me and this kid down the street, his name was Kenny. Uh God, we played I think we spent one summer where we played nothing but that game.
The cover was just a big Union Jack with GTA
Yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a poster I think included in it
Hmm.
that was like that. It was the Union Jack. Um play the shit out of that. Yeah, maybe I didn't really like because we didn't get the system until later on. You probably know way more of the early stuff.
For
When
PlayStation,
did Solid when did Metal Gear Solid come out?
98
98.
October
So like
October
98
'98.
is where all of my big
I
games
mean, that's when the PlayStation One I feel like really took off. Was '98 like '97? It was already there was good stuff in
there
'96,
was
'97, but
well,
'98 is kind of like because '98 is like when RE2 came out in like January or February,
right.
and Metal Gear Solid and like you said Tactics and Spy
99
Ring
is
and
when
Crash 3 and
Resident Evil
so
3 came out.
Yeah, so it really took off, like, because it came out, fall 95 in North America, and we've gone back. We've played the entire launch library on, video games. Like, we played every launch game. That launch sucked, man. Like, it is like, I almost can't believe the system took off
Well,
with how poor that launch was.
what are the launch games for
The
PlayStation?
best one is like Ridge Racer 1, and it has like 2 tracks or 1 track or something. Like it's like this insane amount of like nothingness. So yeah, there was this 3D power tennis. Oh my god, and it's terrible. And um Galarians, I think, or something. No, Keliac, the DNA imperative or whatever.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm so dumb. I know what I played at McDonald's. It's NBA Jam.
you played NBA Jam. Okay.
It for
Makes sense.
sure was. That's all they ever had at McDonald's. Like, I'm assuming this. I don't
Yeah.
distinctly remember,
Well,
but they almost always had games
the
like that.
early games I remember getting notoriety were Warhawk, Jumping Flash, Battle Arena Toshinden, which is terrible, by the way. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Battle Arena Toshinden and the first Twisted Metal. Those were the early stars of the original PlayStation.
Not Street Fighter the movie?
Hell no. But yeah, like, I mean, because again, like, we went back and we compared it, and even though it had a surprise launch, which, boy, was that stupid for the Saturn. The launch roster of Saturn games is significantly better than the launch roster of PS1 games in North America. So much to a point where I'm like, I can't. It still boggles my mind that this thing took off. And I distinctly remember that being in KB Toys, and I've told this story, before, where the mindset I had at the time, even as a wee lad, was like, another CD bullshit system.
Yeah.
Like, it's taking like, another one of these horseshit things, Sega CD, CDI, 3DO, like, man, they're like FMV. It's just, my mind was like, CD just meant FMV games, or just really weird games that are like slow, loaded forever, like clunky. Like, I was not, and then like, and it's Sony. Okay, Sony here. Like, I used to think, at the time I was like, Panasonic made the 3DO, and Magnavox or Philips. Sorry, Philips made the CDI, and the Sega CD was like an add-on, but like, it was just all this other random trash on it. I'm like, this thing is. I thought it was just another one of those. Another one of those weird fucking stereo companies is going to come in. Stereo TV plate people are going to try to come in with the video game system, and it's CD, and all it is just some really crappy FMV games.
Were you really a gamer in the 90s if you didn't get into an argument with someone about Ridge Racer versus Cruisin' USA?
Oh, I mean, the true argument is Ridge Racer versus Daytona, and Daytona's better.
Well, yeah, Daytona's better, but Cruisin' USA was like Daytona.
Because it's funny, because Cruisin' is Outrun. Like,
Wait,
it's
did
not
Daytona
even.
have a home console version
Oh yeah, on the Saturn, day one.
on Saturn? Okay, I
Really,
was thinking-
really short distance. The fog was really close.
well,
Like,
that
the
explains
pop
why
up
I didn't.
the
Because I
pop up was immense on Daytona on Saturn.
Daytona. But yeah, I remember getting into a schoolyard argument over Cruisin' USA versus Ridge Racer. Now, granted, I hadn't played Ridge Racer, but all the best opinions are by people who have
Well,
no idea.
I was under the impression that Cruisin' was like this fantastic game, this phenomenal world class game,
I
and I
like
remember years later renting Cruisin' USA at my grandparents, because it was like, I can't remember why, but it was like this weird thing where it was just like me and my mom. I don't know what was going on with my brother and my dad at that point, where we were just kind of like at my grandma's, and I really didn't have any, like, it was just like this, like, hey, I'm just kind of like stuck here for like a couple days. So she let me go to Blockbuster and let me bring my N64 and
Hell
rent a
yeah.
game from Blockbuster or whatever. So I rented a couple games, and I remember renting Cruisin' USA, because I'm like, okay, well, this is supposedly, it was all over Nintendo Power, right? And I played, I'm like, this sucks. What I didn't realize was that the arcade version of Cruisin' USA was significantly better than the N64, because it was one of the earliest N64 games, and it's a pile
Right.
of nuts. But the thing is, I kind of would like to maybe someday go back and try Cruisin' World and Cruisin' Exotica, because those look significantly better, just from what I've seen of those games. They look way better than what Cruising USA was at the start on the system.
I got Cruising USA by accident.
Yeah, for the Conqueror thing or whatever, right?
Yeah, okay, I told this story before. Uh, and so the version of Cruising that I played on N64 was because it was in a Conquer's
Mm.
Bad Fur Day, uh, like not box. It was like they had actually put it into the cartridge. So the cartridge said Conquer's Bad Fur Day, and they had like screwed on, and like you could hear a little jiggle, but
Mm.
they had put the cartridge in. Um, But yeah, then to get into an argument with someone about Cruising USA versus Ridge Racer, which the original Ridge Racer, I'm actually not sure when that came out either.
90, well, 94, 95.
95, so older than Cruising USA on. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, get into an argument about
The
that
thing is, I
again.
actually kind of like Ridge Racer. Like the music's great, and frankly, I felt like by R4 and then Ridge Racer 64,
Well,
somehow
yeah,
Nintendo
R4s.
negotiated that. I think they're actually really good games. I'm actually kind of sad that they don't make Ridge Racer anymore, but
I've never been like a huge driving game
nah, me neither.
person, so I feel like my opinion on it would be sort of weak.
I mean,
Um,
if we're talking a normal car game where you can't kill your opponent somehow during the race, like normal boring car, my two favorite car racing games are Outrun 2. Half of that has to do with your drunken tirade. I think was it your bachelor party or your birthday?
yeah, it was on my 21st birthday.
Really, his birthday. I mean, I like the game in general. I really like that game, but you know, you screaming at that kid was kind of that lives in my head rent free.
We're in a Vegas arcade. You can't get mad about drunk people, children.
Sega
I
Super
wasn't even
GT
there.
slash Scud Racer. No, you weren't. Jay was racing. Jay won the race, but you had to let him know.
Beat a 12-year-old kid.
Were you in the car with? Were you in Jay's car? Yeah, that's what
I
it
was
was. Okay.
I was sitting behind his seat. So this was I forget what his GameWorks is
It
what
was
it's called.
GameWorks. It was Sega GameWorks in Las Vegas when it was right between the M&M and Coca-Cola store on the
Yeah.
strip.
And you get into the car. And
Yeah,
it's like
it was a two-seater
yeah.
simulated 8-person cabinet for Outrun 2.
Yeah. And so it was my buddy and I was in the passenger seat and screaming across to a 12-year-old he was racing against. I was very drunk. And I was vicious to this kid, and it was just terrible. But we won, and that's all that matters. Did I ruin a 12-year-old's life? Maybe.
I don't know. He just looked kind of like confused and scared. Where you just because you just like stood up out of the car and like your shit's weak, son.
Oh yeah, it was. It was bad. That's the only memory I have of that game.
It's a great game. It's a
And then, like
fantastic game.
20 minutes later, a person evicted Jeff, just screaming at him on a street corner that you're evicted, son.
He- Well, that's a very crazy Vegas story. I almost witnessed someone getting killed by a mob of my friends.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so Outrun is great, but it's no Rush.
Oh, 2049 or
Yeah,
just San Francisco Rush. Well, that's
2049.
okay. So that's Kenny's loves the Rush games. He loves them.
Well,
Loves them.
Kenny's got good taste.
Kenny's likes driving games. I don't know. I need to kill something when I'm driving.
That
I
says
mean,
a lot about you.
we were playing Split Second, and I like Split Second, but like, there's a part of me that realizes as much as we hype up Split Second, the controls in that game, the cars are kind of like, I don't know, the drifting mechanics in Split Second aren't great. And it kind of bothers me. Like if they were like Outrun, the game would be like significantly better.
What was that driving game everybody loved in the arcade for the drifting mechanics?
Initial D.
Yes, God, yeah, and you had to have you had a card,
Yeah,
like you got your driver's card and stuff
too
like that.
boring. That's
Yeah,
too boring.
Rush is better than that.
Like I said, like if I'm in a racing game, I need to kill someone. I need to Split Second. I need Burnout 3, Burnout Revenge. I need that. I need to destroy something. I need to end the life of my opponent. I don't want to just beat them in a race. I want them dead and charred I
Yeah,
want to
that's actually why
stomp.
you hated rhyme so much. Not enough combat and murder.
That's a completely different thing.
If I'm operating machinery, I need to kill.
Exactly. I mean, if I'm just driving in a car and you're like, "Oh, it's all about the skill. It's all about like," I'm like, ugh.
That's why I never understood people that liked playing Chrome Hounds because you're operating such a huge mech and you never really get to kill anything. It's just mostly slowly walking around 99% of the
Not
time.
fun. No, no, exactly. A mech game, you need to be destroying things. If you're not blowing things up with a mech, what are we doing here?
There was a driving game that I really liked, and I'm blanking on the title. It was that one that they mapped all of Maui.
Oh, really?
Yeah, do you remember that? I think it was on the 360. Um,
It wasn't a Horizon, was it? Forza
maybe,
Horizon?
maybe. Uh,
It
it's
could have been Test Drive or
Test Drive Unlimited.
was Test Drive Unlimited?
Yeah. Yeah, it might be that. Um, might be Test Drive Unlimited. Um, but yeah, I remember really enjoying that mostly because I really enjoyed driving around Maui. And it was like one to
Hmm.
one exact recreation
That's
of
pretty
Maui.
cool. But that was on a
Yeah,
360 though.
yeah. Sorry, just total aside about driving
I
games.
mean, just
Otherwise, me and driving game, like I'm not really like I'm not the guy. If I was like, oh, it's the best driving game of all time, you should fucking ignore that because I don't know. Like the extent of my experience with driving games is yelling at a 12-year-old and also accidentally not accidentally telling the lead designer of Forza at an E3 that isn't it boring working on Forza all the time?
I mean, it would be for us. Let's just
It
be
would
real.
be. He had a great response. He was wonderful. I wasn't purposely trying to be an asshole. I was being an asshole. Uh but yeah, his response was just kind of like, I love cars and it's the most stable job in game development. Now at the time, I was kind of like, it's stable. Now that I know more about it, I'm like, well, yeah, actually, that'd be pretty boss. In the industry, like gaming is, like there is no stability. So the idea of like, yeah, okay, every day I come in and I work on driving games, but I love cars and I have a job every
I mean,
day.
if you love cars, yeah. Because the thing is like, so if Sony, you could honestly say, sort of perfected the racing genre with Gran Turismo, but also killed the racing genre with Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo, well, yeah, I think everybody that I know that really loves cars, Gran Turismo is kind of like their one game. Like even if they
Yeah.
do, like Noe loves driving racing in general, although I think he likes bikes more than cars, right?
Hmm.
And he loves Gran Turismo. Um, like because they're so accurate, right? They go into
Yeah. Yeah.
so much detail. The one thing that I will say about Gran Turismo is like it's so accurate almost to be boring.
Yeah, it is. It is boring. Well, I mean, don't tell it to
It's not
Kenny, but it's like,
it's not like
but
gamified.
again, like you can flaunt all the numbers, you can flaunt all this. I'm like, Gran Turismo is only fun if you have like a force feedback steering wheel and like a proper setup for it.
Fair,
Then
yeah, like well
it's kind of fun. But like otherwise, I'm like, this game is just fucking paint drawing, man, dude. Like I don't know, like
yeah. It's like people who love Arma. Like it's just like real war. So boring
it's
and then
fuck.
suddenly terrifying and then boring. Because like
That's
I
the
know
thing,
a lot of
and then because it has every car manufacturer in it, none of them are okay with car damage. So you can't even ruin your cars that you're in. They're invincible, immortal, indestructible pieces of machinery in Gran Turismo.
well,
They handle very realistically, but whatever. It's like I can't kill anyone.
that's because no one is as good of a driver as they think they are. And so if you were constantly confronted with that evidence, well, but what is the first game you ever played on PlayStation?
Oh, it was ESPN Extreme,
Oh, it
which
was
is
ESPN Extreme.
basically Road Rash on rollerblades because you can do rollerblade, street luge, or a bike.
They had Street
Bicycle.
Luge.
Yeah, they had street luge.
I don't know
It's
why, but in the
just like
90s,
laying down like
they made Street Luge movies. Like,
yes, they
the
did.
whole reason Speed has that scene where he's, like, on the mechanics thing going underneath the bus is
Mm.
because Street Luge was super cool in the '90s. Street Luge. to explain it now, it sounds like a fever dream. You're like, yeah, in the 90s, people wanted to get on a board, lay down, and just go fast. And you're like, what?
The best thing to come out of Street Luge was that scene from Hot Rod
Right. Yeah.
with Danny McBride.
Yes.
He fucking beats the shit out of that dude.
Every goddamn so this is my hat. This is totally my hat now. Yeah, Street Luge. It's weird to explain Street Luge. It's sort of like what I imagine explaining rollerblading in the 90s is like. Like if you're a 2000s kid, like if you're like 21, 22 right now, you will never understand how hardcore, like how just into rollerblading people were for a few years.
Rollerblading was a big deal.
There was rollerblade, there was extreme, like you had, okay, Fast and the Furious in the early 2000s. There was a Fast and the Furious style movie for rollerblading, all about a rollerblading competition and some street youths getting into trouble while preparing for this rollerblading. It's like a cross city rollerblading race. Yeah, go look that up. I don't know what it's called, but
Rollerball or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Rollerball was also another rollerblading. That started Chris. God, what was that guy's name? He was like he was the big Chris of the late 90s. He did rollerball. He was in Election. He was great. Oh, he was also in American Pie, I think. That was our late 90s big Chris. I'm trying to think of like
But yeah, that was the first game. The game that made me buy a PlayStation was Grandia 1. Never look back. Well, it's because like they had a really cheap used PlayStation and a really cheap used copy of Grandia at EB Games, and I was like debating which to go. And I don't know if you listen to the podcast or not, but like one of the employees at the time, I was like, oh, should I just get Mario Tennis or should I get this? Because it was literally like I could spend like the $60 on Mario Tennis, or I could get a used PlayStation and a used copy of Grandia for the same price, or roughly the same price, something like that. And he's like, you already have an N64. Why don't you just stick with Mario? And I did, and I bought it, and I'm like, nah. So I took it back and I exchanged it for the PlayStation and Grandia, and I had a much better time. Which is not I don't want to shit too hard on Mario Tennis, but it's like
it's a good time.
I mean, the thing is, it is a good time, but man, when you're not playing with 4 people,
no, that's true. Yeah,
what are you doing? It's the single player. Yeah, it only helps for so much.
The weird thing is like I really loved Ape Escape, but I think the first game that I actually bought for PlayStation was like Final Fantasy Tactics.
That's a good game.
It is a good game, but it like knowing what my favorite game of PlayStation was, and then knowing that like one of I do love tactics games and have. I mean, like I want to say my favorite game on the Game Boy Advance was Tactics Ogre.
Yeah,
probably. Yeah, so it's like that shouldn't be that surprising, but it is a weird. Like most every other game, I had to buy in conjunction with what my brother wanted. Like it was that it was that younger brother syndrome where it's like, well, if I wanted it, it's technically Phil's PlayStation, so he has to okay what up. And this was like one of them. I went and got it. And
well, that was the thing too, is when we got older, and we're into our teens now at this point or whatever, and it just became impossible to deal with, system wide. So it became like we get our own systems, and then it was weird because in that basically created the schism of my brother got PlayStation and I got the N64. So we had our we were just like this house divided between N64 and PlayStation.
That's what happened for us too. Yeah.
The thing is, I did really want to try out the RPGs. I wanted to play the RPGs, so I ended up just buying my own used PlayStation, just because, like, boy, it was just not. It was not worth the hassle dealing with my brother.
I bought when the slim PlayStation 2 came out. I bought my own because my brother was hogging the PlayStation for so much.
Exactly,
because we were that house divided. I never really got to play in 64 games all that much. I played a lot of PlayStation PlayStation games generally. And then he started hogging the PlayStation so much that eventually the PlayStation 2 Slim came out, and I bought myself. That's it.
Yeah, you do what you have to do, right?
No, it's just so weird that that's like such a strong like line in the sand. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just like you're just hogging all
Uh,
the
people
the
people are still like that on Twitter.
yeah yeah yeah. That's fair. All right, last topic about the PlayStation for the or last topic for the episode. If you had to say like, do you have like a regretted game or like it's a popular game for PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and you think it's actually like one of the worst examples from the system?
Well, I mean, okay, worst example. I don't like Gran Turismo 1 or 2, but they're fantastic games. I can't deny the quality of Gran Turismo 1 and 2, but I don't. They're just- I would say, the. Oh man, people would hate me for this one, but for original PlayStation, they're good. Again, these are like, okay, they're good, but they're a far cry from what N64 had was the Spyro games. Like they're
Okay.
pretty good. I like them, but they're not on the level of Banjo Kazooie and Mario 64, Banjo Tooie. They're just not.
Yeah, I would say that that's fair about any of the PlayStation, like the early PlayStation platformers. None of the PlayStation
Yeah.
3D platformers were. They didn't not in terms of like comparison to
I
Nintendo.
will say this. I think the original Tomb Raider games have aged like a banana.
Okay, see, I was gonna shit on Tomb Raiders. I say I don't think Tomb Raider's that good. I don't think I. The thing is like the remake that came out in like what 2013.
Yeah. Well, the reboot. Well, the
The
second
re-
reboot.
yeah, the second that game I liked a lot. I recently tried to play the latest of that series. I don't remember
Oh
what year it
yeah,
came out.
Shadow the Tomb Raider, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and like they did the anime that takes place right after it. I
Mm.
recently tried to play that. Ooh, ooh, no. So I was just
No.
Tomb Raider has it's just never got me. The people that were obsessed with Tomb Raider at the time, like I just don't.
Tomb Raiders have been. It's always been a cooler concept than it is a game.
The
That
right
is
person
that
making
is
Tomb Raider.
that
The
is
right
my
person.
hot take.
Yeah.
I think Tomb Raider Legend might be the best Tomb Raider game, personally, that I've played.
Which one's Tomb Raider Legend?
That's the first reboot remake. Because remember, like when they got to
Yeah.
Angel of Darkness, and then they took it away from Core, gave it to Crystal Dynamics, and she got like the redesign where she was wearing all brown instead of brown and teal.
Right.
That's the only thing I
Okay.
can remember. But basically, the controls were finally good. So
Which is saying something.
So yeah, Tomb Raider Legend, I think to me might be possibly I mean, because 2013, I remember we beat that. Me and Max beat that game. It was one of the earliest playthroughs we ever did for YouTube, and it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a little silly because of how overly crazy dramatic, how over serious it is, and then if you stop and think about it, I'm like, how is there 11,000 people on this island, and how is there 50 billion corpses and skulls just everywhere? It's so silly. Sometimes it feels like you're crawling through a Halloween, discount store with
Yeah.
how many skeletons are just hanging everywhere.
Well,
Um
a lot of people come there to vacation.
yeah, so either way, like it's still a decent game. It's still a good game. It's still a good time, but I don't know. It just
Tomb Raider as a franchise wasn't meant to survive as long as it has, I guess.
yeah, I don't know. And they keep trying. They're still trying. They're rebooting it again. Amazon's paying the bill for the next Tomb Raider game.
Because the
Um,
concept, the idea should be so look at how good Uncharted was. It's the same, it's that same vein.
yeah, it's like Uncharted did something, and Uncharted kept Tomb Raider alive because Tomb Raider is just Indiana Jones with tits and ass. Like, let's be freaking real. Like that's all it really is. But again, like the concept of Indiana Jones is really fun. I hope that game is good. Um,
Early stuff says that it is a lot of fun. So
yeah, and they say it's very Chronicles of Riddick, Butcher Bay. They say, so
okay.
yeah, so a lot of the same devs. So there you go. But like, yeah, it's like Uncharted because Tomb Raider was mega big in the
Oh,
90s.
I know.
even bigger in Europe. And then, like I said, it really fizzled out in North America. And they've kind of like tried everything to sort of like, like reheat this thing in the oven or reheat it in the microwave.
And it's just never worked. Well,
Well, it's like it comes out and it does pretty well, and then it's like diminishing returns. It's like we have the original series and it goes for 5 games, and people are just burned out by that point. And then they reboot it, and the reboot's pretty big, and they do a couple games after that, and then it burns out, and then they
because again, the
reboot it
concept's
again.
great.
And yeah,
They just
it is a great
beat it to
concept.
death.
I think that's the thing is like they if you could just I know Uncharted was like 1, 2, 3, one after the other, for the first 3, but it's like I think I don't know. I think just making a game like let's just fully maximize an idea for a Tomb Raider game, and then just kind of leave it at that, and then like let's not think about part 2 right away. Like let's not just try to like immediately have like the
Let it
next
go
one.
for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, like rather, and I mean, I guess we'll have to be there at this point because video games take half a decade to make now. So I guess by proxy that's fine. But I don't know. I don't know, man. Like it's really weird because I've never again I'm speaking out of my ass here because I don't really know the Tomb Raider lore or the character or the backstory of stuff all that well, honestly.
My
Um,
wife loves Tomb Raider. Loves it. There is no lore.
there is
It's just, it's all like, yeah, there's lore. Okay. I've heard it.
she's
I
like
get to hear it.
she's like the daughter of a wealthy, super wealthy.
Yeah, she's an aristocrat.
Aristocrat who just
And her father and mother were adventurers. Basically, the dark side of it is they were looting the world.
right. They're just British pillagers. That's all they are.
Yeah. And it evolved. Now she doesn't loot, she protects. But the original Tomb Raider, like, she was also just a looter.
Honestly, like these games, including Indiana Jones, which is funny, like Miyazaki hates Indiana Jones because he's going to these other countries and looting them. Like, why are you cheering him? He's stealing. But-
Indiana Jones was doing it to protect him from the Nazis. We don't like the Nazis. So
yeah, exactly. But
better us than them.
here's the thing: if the end of every Tomb Raider game was her giving whatever MacGuffin to the country from which the MacGuffin is from, it would be fine. But
Wildly
instead,
unique, yeah.
yeah. But instead, she's taking it home to her mansion in
Yeah.
Britain,
Where she lords it over everybody else.
right? So she's kind of an asshole.
Lady Laura Croft. Just entirely too soft-chinned for me. No, I want a professor of archaeology that also happens to be great with a whip and a pistol and punching old German dudes. That's what I want. Much
Well, I
more
mean, the
realistic.
funny thing is I actually think Indiana Jones works best when he doesn't really get the MacGuffin necessarily.
Yeah.
Because the first movie gets taken away by the government, puts it in a warehouse, and the second movie he actually gives it back to the village, which is nice for the second movie, I guess. And the third movie it falls into a fucking hole in the ground. So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I love that the first movie falls under the, well, you got to give it to the government. They'll keep it safe.
top man.
Ultimate
I do
weapon
like
that
how it's
kills
very.
everybody around.
I do like how there's a sort of ominous thing about like, oh, they just took it away, and then what are they gonna do? They're just gonna put it in a warehouse.
Hmm. On that note, on the note, hit us in the comments with your favorite PlayStation memories. It's been 30 years.
Yeah.
Maybe
My
you wanna aim for
absolute-
the PlayStation.
My absolute favorite Sony-ish game is Shadow of the Colossus. In case anyone was curious, especially that Blue Point PS4 remake because it runs at 60. I just got to give it to that.
Shadow of the Colossus was weird because when it first came out, I was kind of like, well, what's the fucking point? And then when I got older and I went and played it again, not the remake, the original,
Mm,
like I got it. Like where I was just like, oh, it's vibes.
it's art.
It's vibes. I'm just like, I got it. The reason I went back and played it is I played Journey,
Mm,
and someone was all like, "Oh, this is like a lesser Shadow of the Colossus." They said that on the stream, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Really?" And then I went and played Shadow of the Colossus. Was like, kind of,
Yeah.
kind of. On that note, we've got patrons to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Phoenix. Thank you, Phoenix. And our producers for this episode are Dragon Wolf Makoto, Austenite, Zybernite, Scrunami, Croy35, Hyper Viper 89, LCL Mayhem, and Ziggy Z. Thank you, dudes. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.